Please welcome Mara Ricoy.
I thought they were removing me from a stage already. I don't even open my mouth. Thank you very much for having me here. I don't know if I'm shouting. That may be because I'm Spanish, I don't know. But I'm honored, I'm shaken though, because I'm amongst women that mean a lot to me. That's all of you. And I'm shaking because it's the first time I'm speaking publicly in Scotland, so, you know, it couldn't be a more perfect place. So. And you're making me very proud that my children are half Scottish in this moment. I wanted to say two things because something happened when Rosie, is it Rosie White? Where is she? Was talking, and I was very emotional because I'm a survivor of rape myself. And that somehow linked me to the vigil that was taking place in London, where I was living for many years. So I just wanted to say, that I've been thinking of Sarah Everdirt and the many other victims of patriarchy. And I was also thinking, Rosie talking about the police years ago, and now we have a woman that was killed by a policeman, and it's just unacceptable, it's not safe, and this is where we are, 2022, and we can't forget that. That's one thing I wanted to mention. And the other thing, standing on the shoulders of giants, if I'm here, it's probably because of many other women. One, my mother, but also Sheila Kissinger, who is was a British author that did a lot for women and birth. So I wanted to mention that. Right, this is not me picking up an Oscar, so I'm going to cut down with the credits, but thank you to all the lovely ladies that organized this as well. So obstetric violence is a difficult topic. Sometimes my husband jokes and says, you couldn't just chosen anything more that you will receive more hatred for, because everybody hates me. Obstetricians hate me. Midwives sometimes hate me. Doulas sometimes don't agree with my politics, you know, so there is a lot of problems with that. And I think I'm getting even more hated now that I'm speaking publicly about how I position myself with the same people I have always done, which is women. So it's not an easy topic nowadays, and I'm a bit nervous because of that. Obstetric violence is a concept that I have been asked repeatedly for the past 10 years to define. I found myself often interviewed by journalists saying, what is it? And then the next question will be, what can women do to stop receiving obstetric violence, or what can they do to stop themselves? And I used to be like, hold on a minute, women have to do nothing. Women don't even need to come to my classes. Women should be able to be as ignorant as they please and still not be abused in labor rooms. And after 10 years, I also got fed up with explaining what obstetric violence was, and even more fed up with having men telling me that that was disrespectful to their profession, that term is a bit too much, isn't it? To which I will reply, I don't know, women are talking about feeling violated in birth. They're talking about birth rape. So you explain to me why that is. And surely the problem is how they're feeling and not the language we're using. So this has been an ongoing topic, and after 10 years, what I feel now about obstetric violence, which I will explain what I think it is, because it's many things, and not only the physical aspect of it, but now coming to a point where this issue hasn't been sorted. Women are suffering because they are women. Their bodies are put in labor wards under all sorts of different abuse. And now we also have to make sure that we're talking about pregnant people. No. No. Or even worse, when people are having so much trouble to think of how they're going to be inclusive and talk about women and people. We're no longer people. We are women and people. What is this about? I mean, purely from a linguistic point of view, that's bullshit. Sorry. If I wasn't angry enough, I'm going to get more angry, so beware. So what we're talking about when we talk about obstetric violence, I used to define it in a very polite manner before I was a feminist. I used to go into in 2014, they told me, could you give us a definition for the Royal College of Obstetricians in London? And I thought, oh my God, the important men want to know what the activist thinks. So there is a video in the internet of me almost physically shrinking in my kitchen in the domestic area of my house. And almost apologizing, you know, like obstetric violence. I'm feeling petrified. Nowadays, I have given up on that definition, which has been widely used in different papers and studies, and I have come up with another one, and I'm not going to paraphrase myself. I will tell you what I think. I think is basically the misogyny having a permit within an institution to do whatever they want to us, in short, while in labor. That's what I think it is. And that can be anything from having our midwives in prison, like it happened to Agnes Gerev in Hungary. She spent 3 years in house arrest. She was first taken to jail and then spent 3 years in house arrest for supporting women's rights during birth. She's now unable to practice. She's an obstetrician, a midwife, and I think she's a psychologist as well. She cannot practice. She is been working in the UK doing something completely different to her field because she's been punished and she's been arrested for 3 years and lost any reputation she may have, and also she can't practice as a midwife in her country, in Hungary. So that to me is obstetric violence, because to me it's exactly the same as when women are abused by their partners, and the first thing that they do is to cut any ties with what is familiar to you. And that's what happened to us, and I think it's very important that we understand our history in birth. The history of birth is one of the, midwives are the most feminist profession we have. I'm not a midwife, but I think it's so important to understand that. When patriarchy jokes and says that being a prostitute is the oldest job, no, midwifery is the oldest job, and they took it away from us. And what that means is that the science of women over their bodies is older than we think. And that was an ownership, and that was very rich, and that was in depth, and that was very scientific, despite what they say. It was very scientific because midwives, they may have been illiterate at times, they may not have had the resources, but they did the scientific method. They observe, and they act in consequence. And that's how they worked. And then came the figure of the male obstetrician, and came into a field where they have no idea what they were doing because they were prevented from accessing birth. They didn't know birth. And they didn't have the empathy to our bodies. And they acted on it as best they could. But one of the first things they do was to put us against gravity, with our legs up on the air, shooting babies to the ceiling, and then telling us, "You're not progressing." It's a shame I don't have a banana. I always request a banana, and people think, I'm going to do a magic trick. It gets very exciting. Of course, I always have some funny guy saying, "We already know how the baby got there." Why I use the banana is to illustrate what happened to our pelvis. And our pelvis is a female pelvis. And that's something that you can identify as you wish. Is there. It's my only consolation. 5,000 years down the line, they're going to be like, I wonder how she felt. So when women were placed on our backs, basically our tailbone is flexible to a certain extent, which means when they placed us in our back, this bone became an obstacle for the baby to come out. So never mind we're against gravity, and also we're compressing the flow of the blood supply from the aorta and the cava on the back, but we're also making it more complicated for the baby. So we're talking about 28% difference between being upright, which we have always done in every culture for thousands of years. We were always upright. We made holes in on the floor. We suspended ourselves from trees. We were always very creative. Putting ourselves on the back meant 28% less. And then fighting, of course, against gravity. We're that way. So that was one of the first problems they created. The issue is that they became the saviors of the problem. And this is a whole, I'm only using that tiny example to try to make you understand that all these situations were what came first. And what came first was creating a problem that wasn't necessarily there, and then making us feel very incapable. Listening to Dr. M is just, it's just weird, because the first thing that came to my mind when you were describing these instances in porn, two things came to mind. One, as an anecdote, I found a little video of me after giving birth that I put in YouTube on a porn website. That was the first thing that came to my mind. The second thing that came to my mind is that the description of some of the porn you were talking about, I was thinking of videos I have seen of obstetric violence. One of the most horrific videos I have seen, an association asked me to translate part of it because it was half in Spanish, it was in the States, and the woman was South American, was a woman that was refusing an episiotomy. Now, an episiotomy, some of you may know what it is, some of you may have experienced it, but it's a cut that is done in the perineal area, in the vulva, and it's done to help us, so they say. But of course, once you have put the woman up in the air and shouting things and make her all adrenalinic, yeah, maybe they're helping us. I don't think so. This woman in this video, she's saying, no, please, doctor, don't do it. Please, doctor, don't do it. This horrible, horrible doctor is sitting there being quite disgusting with all misogyny and racism and xenophobic and all these things, and then saying, well, if you don't like it, you better go back to Kentucky. And he's waiting there. The mother of the woman in labor then becomes engaged and saying, listen to the doctor. The nurse is playing what I call bad cop, good cop in midwifery and so on. There's always one person trying to do something and then the other one trying to listen to him. It will be worse if you don't listen to him. So it's a whole scene there that's quite horrific. And this woman is screaming, her legs in stirrups. And at one point, me translating the video with the headphones, I said to the association, I can't do this anymore. I can't watch it. And they asked me, have you counted the times that she's been cut? And I said, yes, 12. So when I have somebody, like I had recently trolls in my Twitter, from Spain sometimes, and a country that has just been finally sentenced by the United Nations for the levels of obstetric violence within the frame of sexist violence towards women. And they have the guts, for being polite, to come and say to me, term violence, how can you do that? You know, we're offended, and all this nonsense. And then they have this big carry-on in the paper saying that they will not accept that women are talking that they are being violent. When I know, and I'm 47 years of age, that that's what they did to my mother, and to many mothers. And these women were often totally anesthetized. I was thinking this morning, you know, I read all these things about animal rights, and rightly so, you know, but sometimes the descriptions of the poor calf has been taken from a mother, and I think of how that happened to most of us. Women have been, you know, the first form of pain relief in childbirth was chloroform because Queen Victoria asked for it. No, Queen Victoria didn't ask for it. It was Prince Albert, for starts. But the other thing that we need to remember about that is that the heavy anesthetics in childbirth quite often was because it was a puritanical society, and women in labor, if you let them labor on their own pace spontaneously, what they tend to do is sound like they're having an orgasm. And that couldn't happen. These women looking like animals. My theory is that they are so terrified of being an animal and dying that they can see us remind them of that. They can see women remind them that they're not going to be some glorious statue in a university. They're going to end up in the earth where we all come from. And we're very earthy in that way. And that somehow is a shock, seeing our fluids, seeing our bodies for our own ownership. And I think what is important is I don't consider myself a body. There's been a lot of discussion about, like, we're not just a body. No, but we must not forget our body and our autonomy. And it's that dissection, it's that splitting that got us here sometimes. And I think it's very important to reclaim our bodies as the body of women. And I'm not saying that we all have to be giving birth in the mountains or giving birth at all. What I'm saying is that we need to make those choices, and they must be informed, because otherwise it's just us buying into submission. And birth is a power to grade, whether by rejection or because we want to do it, to be just simply eluded, forgotten, and left somewhere else. Because now birth is an issue in feminism as well, as it has always been, but we are now having the issues of surrogacy and exploiting women and renting women. You know the first thing that happened in the Ukraine war and crisis? All the Spanish parents running there to save their products that they just purchased, not caring about the mothers that have birthing their babies. This is happening because we don't have the autonomy over our bodies. Chest feeding as an expression now in my field. We haven't even reclaimed breastfeeding. We haven't even been out of having issues and being kicked out of places for breastfeeding. When porn can happen, we cannot use our own bodies for ourselves. And yet, we have to now change the name to chest feeding? What? What? I don't know what else to tell you. Apart from the fact that I'm very angry, and I'm glad that you're angry if you are, because we're going to need that.